bills. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 more bills on the agenda for today.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, all fun. So we're live. So this is a continuation of the 2024 budget, and we have the Defender General here to present his budget request. And so welcome again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And we will, I see you've brought your business manager. So
Yeah.
if
You
you
thought she was retired, didn't you?
like,
So did she.
did
2
temporarily.
years ago.
I'm back.
Well, it's the nature of the world today, where Laura did retire, but then after 47 years, but then a year later the person retired left, and Laura really never left because she was training, and then now she's back. And
Well, if it's any encouragement, I think the most senior tenured employee might be an AOT and it's 60 years. So you have a little
Really?
ways to go.
I have another 10,
12 years to go.
All right, something to aspire
I
to.
always wanted to get it at 50, but So anyway, as you know, that we've been able to for 24 consecutive budgets stay within our budget without
You've been
budget.
here for how long?
So I'm in my 24th year. I've been here 23 plus years. Remember when you used to be the AHS second under Howard Dean?
I remember that.
He's the guy who appointed me the first time. Yeah, exactly. But
I know. You realize that a lot of the people who work for you weren't even born.
oh, I know.
Oh.
Believe me. Or they definitely couldn't do certain things we all take for granted.
Here comes Senator Sears, your guy.
I knew he was.
But he had to take a Tylenol in advance of your testimony. I don't know if that's indicative.
Well, I started this morning.
Testimony
this morning, trying to screw up a bit.
Okay.
I'm trying to prevent you from doing it. That's all.
Well, we went ahead and did it
I
anyway.
know.
So,
Give and take, right?
well, we'll let you run through. Obviously, your budget is,
Relatively simple.
well,
But here's the deal. The governor's recommend basically gave us some of the things that were non-negotiable no matter what you did. We have had an ongoing reclassification in our system of all of the physicians that are pretty much non-lawyers. And that's been going on over a period of time. And those salary and benefit increases as a result of reclassification were incorporated in the governor's recommend. We had pre-existing, as you know, 23 years ago, I started doing 4-year contracts with the primary public defense contractors. And so we do 4-year deals with them so that we know over the course of basically my term what it's going to cost for them. Those were built in. We had lease increases and lease changes and the like, which were negotiated during the course of the year that would impact fiscal year 24. And that is basically what we got from the governor's recommend. This has been a bit of a unique year for us in that the budget is an evolving thing. The proposed budget is an evolving thing, even with administration. Spoke to Adam Gresham last Friday about some of these evolutions. So what we presented in the fall that ended up working into the governor's recommend is not even where the governor's office is with us at this point. And
you mean they're endorsing an increase?
they're endorsing, well, I would say a change that tends to be an increase because that's what everything is doing right now.
And then we just got a memo about ad hoc representation.
Yeah, that is part of it, but that's the least of my overall worries.
Oh.
That is a long time in coming. The as I understand, the Supreme Court sets the ad hoc rate.
Mhm.
There have been over the years some rumbling that it hasn't been changed since 1993, which is true. So that's a long time. And the Bar Association urged the Supreme Court to amend the rate. They haven't officially done it yet. I understand that they will be doing it. And I hear that they'll probably make it effective on July 1st. So it's going from 50, I think it'll be going from $50 to $100 an hour, which is at this point somewhere around a third of what like the average hourly rate for private
What would be
practitioners
the
is.
price tag to move that up?
Well, double whatever we spend at ad hoc
I
now.
know, so. what is it?
That's, so what do we spend, like 250, 300 now?
Close to 300.
So
Okay, so the-
call it 500, 500 to 600.
I'll put it-
And that-
$500 to $600. $1,000.
And,
I got it.
and that, so that's, well, yeah, I mean,
And only an increase of 300,000.
it's an additional 250 or whatever, 250, 300. And, the budget's $23 million now, so I'm not, that amount of money is not like a massive percentage of the budget. It's not of overall concern to me, but let me tell you what the concerns are.
Okay.
Number one, and I have provided this, well, let me just say, I think I did go through all the things that,
You
the
told us what
government
was in, but now you're gonna tell us what isn't in.
right, what isn't in. We have always tried to make vacancy savings a real number, and I know that budget makers make it a place that, if you need to balance something, you make it happen that way. But our vacancy savings has been grossly too high for a while. And really what it means is we end up starting off in a $300,000 or $400,000 hole, because real vacancy savings would probably be around $100,000. And the vacancy savings that's in the budget is about $400,000. That's meaningful because it's effectively a couple of positions or some number of contracts.
Can you even fill positions in that?
No, but it still isn't, but that isn't the whole story either. Any of the positions we fill, we can't fill by some of my old techniques of, you get the 30-year employee who retires and now you're hiring somebody at entry level, step one, like as an attorney, or even in some of our support staff. Nobody's taking that money. It's not happening. So we're hiring attorneys at step 3, step 4. We're still a little below market. We're below market, but we're not. But we're able to get them in the door. And the people who are in the staffs, the support staff, the legal assistants, the investigators, and the like. That's been all part of the reclassification we've been going through in the last year. And one of the things we found with trying to hire for Laura's position, which she was a administrative services manager, and we were trying to reclassify that position. When we set it all out before administration, they said, really what you've got here is doing too many jobs and it's underclassified. So just.
No wonder she can't retire.
So, yeah, well, she was actually doing like 4 jobs, but we took 2 of the 4 away and split them around the office. And I'm not exaggerating that either. I can tell you what they are. They're literally full-time support jobs. But when you're around for a long time, you know how to do everything. You just start taking everything on. So when we went to reclassify Laura's position, Gresham's in the meeting and the folks from HR, Beth Stevens there. And they're like, you need 2 positions to fill what you've got it pared down to. So they're giving us they gave us a financial director position, which would actually do the finance side of her job. And then we would also have the administrative services manager position, which she's been filling over this period of years. And when the first budget came out, that money wasn't in that. And we just did this last week. So they're seeing the evolution of like what's going on as well. And I have sent over something on the Upward kind of the upward pressures. We have the two sides of the program, public defense and assigned counsel for the conflict side. In public defense, obviously for the primary public defense, although they're more and more getting close to the same amount of caseload. Nevertheless, biggest things we're dealing with. Number one, other personal services. Our ops line has been level funded for 8 years, all right? Well, the psychiatrists, psychologists, private investigators, accident reconstruction people, all of the people who do the support work for the DG's office, they don't care that our line's been level funded for 8 years. They're doubling and tripling their hourly rates. And in the last couple of years, post-pandemic, we've seen the psychologists, psychiatrists, and a lot of that work going on in forensic evaluations and the like. They've been going from $250 an hour to $400 an hour, like upping their rates. And I think part of what they're doing is they know that a whole bunch of people have left the state, so they're not available to do the work. So we have to look out of state. When we look out of state, that's what the out of state people are charging. So the ones who are left in state are matching the rates of the people from out of state because they know that's what the market will bear. And so I asked in the fall, this was part of the original ask, was for an increase of $500,000 in the other personal services line, $400,000 in the public defense side, and $100,000 in the assigned counsel conflict side.
That's what your request is over and above what the.
Correct.
500.
Because there was no increase. Yeah, 500,000 total. But it was,
And Adam Gresham, you said, has had an epiphany on your need for this?
well, he understands, I understand you've got to pay for these things. That's what he said to me last Friday.
That's helpful.
And, one of the things I told him, and I pointed out, and it's, hey, I'm just stating a fact, I'm not criticizing. 3 cases, for example, that were dismissed, these mental health cases that were referred for prosecution to the AG's office. By the time they're done, those are going to cost the state $1 million a case. We spent, when you count all the people's time and all of that, in the last period of months, just in this year, regarding the one that just went to trial, the Duran case, that was over $200,000 just this year. And it's all on mental health experts and the like that you have to do if you're going to do those cases right. So when you make these decisions, those things cost money. And that's just this year. If I added up the total, it's many hundreds of thousands of dollars. We ran into this one other time, if you remember, during the Prue cases from up in the Northeast Kingdom there.
I know.
And those awful cases.
It's terrible.
And, but to do your due diligence as a defense lawyer and to attempt to provide a defense adequately for your client, those cases cost $250,000 a piece in expert fees. And when you bring these in, that's part of what happens. But that's just one high profile example, like the Garand case and the Burgoyne case, and those things that have gone to trial. But that's just one example of what's going on in the system as a whole, because they go on when it's simple assault cases, they go on when it's domestic cases and aggravated assault cases and drug cases and all kinds of things. We're going to end up spending that money whether you give it to us or not. I'll either get it now or I will, for the first time, have to break my streak and come back to budget adjustment, and you can give it to me then. The bottom line is that it's not a cost we can control, and it's one that has not, we've done a good job of keeping it level for 8 years. I don't think it's unreasonable.
That's for expert witnesses.
Yes, and it also includes things like transcription, which, by the way, again, this happened. We build the budget for fall, get the governor's recommend, the court negotiates a new deal with the transcriptionists for an increase in their rate, which isn't included in the original governor's recommend or in our original ask. Well, that's me, of course.
probably.
It's only the press, I'll ignore that. I'm sorry about that. I thought I had.
Somebody's texting.
Yeah,
us.
Greg, he's watching.
I didn't commit to any.
Well, no, I mean, he didn't, there was one thing he did commit to a dollar amount on, that had basically had to do with my pay act, which is a massive change year to year because of all of the reclassifications. But he also, he didn't give me any numbers or anything else. He said, I understand what you need, and I understand this is a concern. The second thing is, as I said, they split Laura's position into two positions, one of which is not funded at all, and that is $143,000 to fund the position that was created last week. So, and that's in public defense. The other thing that didn't exist at the time was the 3 position reclassifications that hadn't gone through the process yet. It's another $35,000. And
A document
Oh,
that
yeah.
totals your wish list here.
yeah, sure, I sent
It's
it
the
to you.
last page in the packet,
Last page.
of the whole packet. There's a single paper. Right there, that's it.
Okay, I've got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, if you expect me to remember all this, your expectations are too high.
Well, I thought that's how you did. The only person I knew who did that was Jim Reardon. He didn't write anything down. Everything.
Yeah, well, I can keep quite a bit in my head.
So anyway, in kind of, if you're looking at that paper, if you look at the things below that, and there's sometimes I don't understand how people think about things. Like, we go through a pandemic, and so we can't have in-person training. So when we budget, we take in-person training out. When we go through a pandemic and we can't do travel in-state or out-of-state, we take that out of our budget because we don't need it. We're now out of the pandemic, but I asked to have it put back in and none of it went back in. So despite the fact that we have to have in-person trainings and do travel. All right, it's not a lot of money, but it's, it adds up little by little. I talked about the vacancy savings issue, reducing it from approximately 390 to 100. And then the only real addition to the program that I'm talking about is a Bennington juvenile attorney. Because
Bennington, was that strategically selected?
I wish. But the Bennington juvenile caseload has been exploding. And
Which is why we need to do that. That's why.
so, I had asked for a Bennington juvenile attorney, which we didn't get. The only other thing that from a kind of base of the budget point of view that we have to look at, as I have 8 serious felony units, and those serious felony units have saved literally tens of millions of dollars in the last 23 years in the way we handled murder cases. When I started, when I put them into effect, they were getting paid $100,000 a year. And I've been able over the years to raise them to 130. They need to be higher. They need to be at 150. I've set a standard for the contractors where they're getting paid $150,000 gross per lawyer equivalent caseload, right? Which is the average amount that a 40-hour-a-week public defender is supposed to handle in the course of a year. That's the caseload part. These are effectively full-time jobs, and they're getting paid less than the standard, while the people who are handling lesser cases are actually making the 150 that they should be making. So that didn't go in, and one way or the other, I'm gonna
So
get.
this is staff. These are
No, these serious felony units are all contracts.
all contracts. Okay.
With private
Private.
attorney.
Right. Up your way, Dave Slaves, one of them, I think,
Yeah. He emailed us a while back. So
So what happened when the courts are shut down to all these people if you had no cases?
Well, they had cases.
You still had them?
Oh, yeah, they
They had the
did.
cases, but what we didn't have is trials.
Yes, so how did you do the cases?
you guys appropriated us a bunch of money for pandemic relief, so to speak. And we actually put in cases because, well, we put in contracts so that people would have those cases and prepare those cases and get them ready to go to trial, which they have done. And the problem is that the cases came in quicker than they went away. And when the court opened up again, now you've got this massive backlog on top of your regular caseload that you're dealing with. So the bottom line is those cases are with lawyers and ready to go right now. And, you know, we've been trying a good number of cases, the cases that could be resolved during that time. Many of them were resolved. But what you have now, particularly the ones held in jail, are the cases that actually need to go to trial. And when you take effectively 2 years out of the ability to do trials, you have a problem. But you know, we're ready to go on that. That is not driving anything that's on this particular sheet, aside from the other personal services, because the cases that would have gone to trial over the course of 2+ years are now getting crammed into a smaller time frame. And so you combine that with the increase in the prices and you have a spike in the cost. There's another section here, which is the bane to my existence. The case management, we have a case management system that we are going to be going live with on July 1st, if you remember.
We were borrowing something from some other state.
Look, that was about 20 years ago. I did that. And then
I had it filed away.
then you did. That was good. We were going to do that. We had a deal, and then we ended up doing a case management system 7 or 8 years ago, which is the one we have actually in place right now. If you remember, we were the first ones in the state to come in under budget on time with that system. So they hung around for about 7 years, and then the company that ran it and supports it said, we're no longer running it and supporting it, so you have to upgrade. And they basically tried to extort us into taking their next very much more expensive thing, which we didn't do, and we got another vendor. And so the other vendor, we've been working on this for 3 years now. Our go live is July 1st, which it will be on time. Working with the Agency of Digital Services, you know, maybe in the past we would miss things, but in missing things, we didn't spend any money on anything we missed. ADS, I do have an in-house project manager, Mary Diaz, we know for many years, I'm sure. We used to come over here all the time, and she's doing a great job with that. But there's also a project, they have to have their own project manager and have their hands and everything. And so there have been a number of things that they want us to do by go live, which is this list of case management system additional costs that add up to $207,000. And they're on the list, and on my sheet, you don't have the highlighting. The stuff that's highlighting, I got to pay for no matter what I do. And that's that stuff. That's part of that. All of that stuff I've got to pay for no matter what I do. But it's one-time money that goes into the system.
Customer service has got some one-time.
We don't have any one-time money.
$10 million.
The only thing I
The
can,
governor and I agree on that 10 million.
the only thing I can tell you about that is our system costs about half of what the state's attorney's done. So, you know, we're still doing okay. We're actually in good shape otherwise. I think in a couple $1 million project, you know, this doesn't surprise me, although I don't like it. You know, I could do this, I mean, I said this before, I could do this cheaper in the private sector, but I'm not in the private sector. So, you know, we have a lot of things driving everything that we're doing, problems that we're trying to address. You know, some of the biggest ones are we can't hire people. we have a big backlog we've got to deal with. But from my perspective, I understand kind of like the state's attorney's reaction to the backlog is, well, give us 42 more people and we'll get at the backlog. I don't think that actually helps.
They wanted 14.
Yeah, well, that changed from the House.
Now they're up to 42.
Well, no, they were 42 in the House, now they're down to 14. They wanted 3 per county. But the point being, it doesn't matter if you give the state's attorneys 50 lawyers and you don't give us any. If you don't have any judges to put them through, it doesn't make any
Well,
difference.
they've made a request too.
Well, they wanted 1, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, just.
Yeah, well, that's not enough for as far as the backlog goes. So to me, this is
Well,
a,
they've been relying on some retired judges coming and working, quite a lot of them, but that's not a long-term solution.
no, and to me, this is a matter of putting one foot in front of the other and taking on the cases that are in front of you until you work it out. The big cases are going to get through, they're going to get to trial, and it'll work out all right. Where you're going to have the problem is in the low-end felonies, the felony property crimes, and the misdemeanors and the like, because you're going to end up with 7- and 8-year-old misdemeanors and low-end property crimes because those don't have priority in the court. And at some point, I mean, I don't know that I would want to spend the money to push all those things through, but if you do, okay, we'll do them. The thing is that as you're seeing even with the cases now that go to trial, evidence is bad. Witness, they don't have a good evaluation of what they're bringing to trial, in my estimation, because some of these, to me, are quite obvious that you don't have your alleged victims are not cooperating, your other witnesses have disappeared, all of those kinds of things. And so they're going to dismiss them on their own, or they're going to go to trial and lose a lot of these cases.
You did.
The point being, we've had some legislation that's been, like some hundreds of these cases, particularly in the misdemeanor area. I don't know what's happening with that. I can't worry about what I can't control. But it's I've talked about this with joint Senate and House Judiciary Committees previously. And we'll see what happens. The bottom line is I don't see this, in my view, as a crisis. Right? We got a problem, but I'll tell you honestly, of the misdemeanors that are hanging out there in these low-end felonies, we probably don't know where a third of those people are. They came in during the pandemic at some point. They went somewhere else. They're indigent folks. They're transient to begin with. So a lot of people weren't from here. And I don't know where they are. And 6 years from now, when we get to their trial, we'll have even less idea where they are. So, there are just some realities of the system that I think have to be recognized.
Yeah, may as well stop and smell the roses.
But
dismissing the case.
there's
Well,
victims that we have to worry about.
well, they disappear too. I mean, that's,
Understood.
and yeah, not always, and again, I said, we're talking about, I'm estimating a third of them we aren't going to find, but there's going to be 2/3 who will, and then we'll see what happens,
I look forward to working with you on your budget again this year.
Yeah.
And I definitely support the $100 increase, $50 increase for the analog council. But I've heard from a number of attorneys besides Bob Haley.
So what do your
And I-
yellows add up?
Problem of
Because
only
they
having
have the
$50
figures that are out
Oh, yeah.
there.
Not upgrading that since 2000.
Yeah.
I
No,
thought it was
no.
93, that's
No, it's right here. I have
30 years.
It's out here.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, that's,
But that's an ongoing of 250.
here, if you want, I'll give you.
We'll take that up in judiciary.
Well, the addiction.
It's the same thing, it's just that that was for my benefit, the
Yeah,
ones that
that's
I,
just highlighting what he feels are the,
and the only last,
uncontrollables.
the only last thing that I will tell you that I think you need to consider, and I brought this up probably for 5, 6 years. The special fund does not perform nearly at the level that the spending authority has been granted. So it's really, again, a hole. There's not money there to spend. We had our special fund, $590,000. We've been collecting around, what, 250, 300? In that range. And that's been for a number of years now. There was a period of time right at the beginning of when I was DG, there were some issues with getting money from the court and some other, the tax department and other stuff that got resolved. And for a few years there, we were having $600,000-700,000 in collections from the special funds. We were actually able to get excess receipts to cover things that were hurting us on other parts of the budget. But for a number of years now, and really it goes back to probably 2008, it hasn't even come close to performing the way that the spending authority is. But we've, like I said, juggle things, work around, don't hire people, or don't fill a contract, do all of the usual things you do to make a budget work as it evolves throughout the year. And so, I hate to throw these things on your plate, but better that you know about them, and then you can figure out what you want to do, and then I'll figure out what I have to do.
So you know what are.
Yeah, I'm just surprised that Bennington juvenile attorney is not absolutely needed.
Well, it's, what is it, third? No, it's on the down. Yeah, well, you know why? Because the other stuff I've got to pay for no matter what.
Right, that's right.
Yeah, the others are just
I would have
uncontrollable.
put that on the highlight.
Well, if you'd like to move that up on the list, you can.
Well, Fred needs all the help he can.
I agree with that.
You don't want to lose Fred.
Are there-
Well, he's gonna retire pretty soon.
So he can't.
Just like Laura can, I guess.
We're trying.
And what about you? You've been 24 years?
Yeah, I'm in my 24th year, but it's 23 plus. If all things go well, I'll finish this term and I'll do another one, and that might be it, but I don't know.
4-year terms.
4-year terms. It'll be around 30 years at that point, so.
You get enough retirement to retire.
Oh, we could retire anyway now.
I could have retired before I started,
Yeah.
but look, the only way to afford to do this job is to have another career. But the thing about that is that, I never planned to be here this long.
None of
And
us
then
do.
it's just,
That's why you
Just
probably
keeps
took defined contribution rather than defined benefit. Because you didn't think you're gonna be around that long.
yeah, although,
Like
yeah,
my
it's
mother
all how you think about
didn't
it.
think, why don't have my tooth pulled? Because I'm not gonna live that long, But she did live that long.
Yeah.
My mother got that same thing from her sisters. Said, Charlotte, how come you don't have false teeth? She said, I didn't know I was gonna live to be 92.
Was it Bob Hope who said, if I known I was gonna live this long, I would have taken better care of myself?
And the same tooth conversation back then.
Oh,
Oh, you grind your teeth. I said, will they last till I'm 80? It's like, that's one way to look at it.
Actually, you can go and get, my son has those. You just buy, can have them molded.
Yeah, I don't like stuff in my mouth.
Well, all right, then grind away.
So, can I answer any other questions?
I think Senator Sears will probably have a more detailed discussion with you.
Probably.
So thank you though for,
I'm gonna try to meet with he and Campbell in the same room.
I think, good idea. There is a
If
sort of
Campbell gets his
relationship.
40 positions, yeah, or whatever he's asking for, then, and we only have one more judge, we have no more public defenders.
Yeah, it really hinges on whatever the state or the defenders get. It hinges on, do you have enough judicial capacity to put it through?
Mhm.
So you can give me a whole bunch and John a whole bunch, and we still couldn't get it through if there wasn't enough judicial time.
That's right.
Doesn't not
And
raise
if
that.
you
Then
give
you
him
also,
everything he wants, me nothing, and the court nothing, it would make any difference.
Maybe we ought to put
Well-
the judicial system on a quota system.
Quota.
Yeah, you either do 20 or so many a day or you're out of here.
Well, that sounds really
Have they come in
reasonable.
yet?
Yes,
You
yes.
could ask that question.
Well, I mean,
we
hell,
can point that out to the judiciary.
Yeah, I
They're-
think, yeah, I think so.
They're the ones that are responsible for the backlog.
yeah, so, yeah, put them on a quota
So
system.
should have this thing.
That's Justice Ryder, Chief Justice
Yeah,
Ryder.
I think he
Because,
might
you
have a
know,
response.
We pay most, the whole show.
I know,
We pay
Well,
the
but
defenders.
there's I missed part of it, because evidently they're gonna be making a decision fairly soon, so. On a delay in hearings, for just denied,
Oh, justice delayed is
some
justice
guy
delayed.
that's got a long, that's been in jail for 5 or 6 years.
What, on being detained?
You know, oh, well, we've
Yeah.
got, there are cases that,
Yeah.
where people have been there 6, 7 years at this.
Waiting for a trial.
Yeah.
God, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars just to keep them in jail.
Well, they probably, if they're found guilty, would stay in jail. They use that against, I mean,
And they
they
give
use
them
that,
time,
they-
that time,
they get
credit for
credit
time.
for time served, so.
Well, it's always a pleasure.
Yeah, I, you know, I like coming in here. Too bad it's only once a year.
Well, you can
Good to
come
see you.
along.
All right, thank you.
Thank you
I
for
do
your
appreciate
list.
Yeah, thank you.
So I see that Eric, you're here because of S4.
That's right.
And Senator Steers.
That score is a bill that does a number of things.
We're not disputing the merits,
Okay,
just
good.
the money.
Well, I mean, it's important to understand that this,
No, I'm just talking about what we do today.
okay, I understood, but the bill itself is
I know, there's more to the bill, certainly.
to, there is $10 million appropriated from the general fund to the Department of Health fiscal year 2024 for the purpose of supporting the community safety grant program established by 20 VSA 4671. And the funding is available for the community safety grant program from federal grants or legal settlements related to drug use and criminal activity. Said federal settlement funds will be used first. And there is an amendment on to have 1% of the 10 million or whatever number we end up with go to administration by the Department of Health of the grant for community safety grant program. And this
So
is
the
a
Commissioner of
program
Health is going to be the head honcho for this?
Yep, in consultation with the, if you look up above, the, you know, there's a commissioner in section 9. It spells out how they will be used and the rules will be submitted and so forth. So it's not just a grant that would be, you know, just apply for it. It's going to have to describe how the municipality's community has been impacted by increasing violence associated with drug use, gang activity, or human trafficking. Provide a detailed plan for a community program designed to decrease the demand for and decrease, obviously decrease the violence associated with illegal drugs.
So what you're doing is treating violence as a public health.
Yeah, more or less. This is the section of the bill that I think provides communities with an opportunity to seek ways to diminish the violence that they're
So-
seeing.
Not to anyway dismiss the merits of your grant proposal. You know what we do in this committee.
I
So,
was afraid of that.
and not that, and not in any way to debate the benefit or merits, but we're gonna have to put this with all the other competing things and let it come to the top, and you're asking for 10. We hope we could do 10.
Can we put in XXX?
Well, we'll put in our usual language.
Well, no, but I mean, the language, it's important to have the language of the grant program. in
Oh,
the
yeah,
bill.
yeah, sure, yeah.
And instead of the
No,
sum of 10 million, you could, and I will point out, the governor agreed with us and put 10 million in his budget for this purpose.
And you're very fortunate you have the governor's agreement, because there are a whole host of things that he apparently didn't agree to.
I
that
understood,
we're-
but,
So
this is
we'll-
one where we agree, where I agree with the governor.
I know, and you're on record numerous times. My question is, we would keep the language, and then we would say the amount of the grants is
Which will be subject to
would be
appropriation,
subject to the appropriation.
and then we strike the appropriation section.
I
That's all
expected that off.
I know you did, and we didn't want to disappoint you.
I know, I'm gonna get rolled.
I need to ask a question.
Yeah, well, about the appropriation or around the larger bill? Because,
Well, about the appropriation, because this is an appropriation for the violence prevention program, and we're establishing a new program here. That's what's happening
but with one-time money.
with one-time money. There is currently a comprehensive prevention council in the Department of Health that has a cross-government representation, including public safety. So now in the governor's office overseeing this,
We got Monica.
there's Monica Hutt, who is the chief prevention officer. But the governor has also named someone else in charge of violence.
Right.
So the issue, I think it's Mackenzie, is it? I'm not sure. But so this really complicates some of the, how the money would be distributed and how it's going on. And then to complicate it further, we also.
Well, you're using the term complicate, I would
I
disagree.
mean, no, I think it's enhancing. Let's say it's enhancing, but I'm just wondering as we go.
Well, how those existing structures.
I want to know how they
interrelate with
fit
this.
together
The
because they're,
municipalities would be applying, municipalities or others would apply for this community safety grant program under the rules established by the commissioner.
But
but
I
we
guess
don't know
maybe
if
we're,
that's not happening now with the
Well,
prevention council.
This
Just
is
trying to sort out.
over and above.
Yeah.
I don't think it complicates anything, frankly. I think it provides communities with an opportunity to deal with the violence they're seeing in their streets. And I think that if you're looking at communities like Burlington and some of the other, in Bennington and some in Springfield and other communities that have been hit by violence, there may be specific things that they would like to do in their communities,
I don't disagree.
like Project Vision or something.
oh, I think
And
she's
we don't
looking at
have-
the entities that are cited here as
I'm not disagreeing with that.
involved in this initiative.
It's how we're putting together a whole new structure.
Well, it's a
That-
one-year grant program, and then the communities would need to pick up in the future.
But what would be the, I guess, maybe to phrase it a different way,
Modeled on what happened in Massachusetts, where the monies came out of various,
That may well be, and that might be the right thing to do, but we already have a structure within the Department of Health that might facilitate this.
Well.
So, and the other piece of it is, and
do you
I'm
think
not
that needs to
disputing.
be named? We've already got the Commissioner of Health as the head. Wouldn't you talking
Consultation with
in
the chief
consultation
prevention.
with,
We
Chief
already
Prevention
have,
Officer.
we have a director of the Prevention Council who was hired specifically as an ongoing.
They're under the Commissioner of Health, right?
No, they're under the Chief Prevention Officer of the Governor's Office.
They're under Monica.
And so they're under Monica.
Oh,
And
they're
then there's a big council inside Department of Health that includes across state.
so what you
government.
want to do is make sure that this is connected with.
Now we're gonna have
that
two.
So the director is
One's
an AOA
violence,
position.
one is violence associated with substance use disorder, and the other one is substance use disorder and everything. It's all, so it's all together. It's not, so I'm not saying it's not a good thing to do, but wouldn't it be great to coordinate those programs?
Well, they've got in consultation, so I guess what you want to do is maybe reference those other
I would need,
players in the prevention sphere.
No, I
No,
would
you
say,
don't want
I
to
would like
reference
to hear from the prevention council before we allocate $10 million and know if this is something that they are thinking about doing or can't do. And so maybe they can't, but then so you need this, but maybe you don't have to
Designed
have
to be unique. and not
two things going on.
Part of what the failure of the system is. The failure of the system is seen in the streets of our communities. And the failure of the system to deal with, I don't even have methadone in my community yet. 5 years we've been promised methadone. 5 years we haven't had it. So when a constituent is in need of treatment, they either have to go to North Adams, Mass or Brattleboro, Vermont. That's how well we've coordinated so far. And I just think that just, it's mind boggling that we have all these programs in the state level. These would be the communities actually seeking out something for them that they have determined would help them to reduce the violence in their communities. So I think if we coordinate that, I don't have a problem with it consultation with these groups. But I think
Which
to
group?
see these as
Well, the Monica.
something separate from,
We added, and it's not on the violence side, it's on the treatment side and the program side.
Total prevention.
We added language in the budget, either last year or the year before, that directed that all of the dollars that get spent on the program side have to go through Monica's area to make sure that everything was coordinated. In this, I don't disagree with any of this. I'm just wondering, should her position be included
I think that may be what Jim
in the
is.
consultation?
Yeah, I just want it to be
of
everybody working together. Otherwise, you're gonna have representation on this council doing one thing and this one doing something similar but maybe different. So it might be more expensive to do it if you have that.
Or you might see where you put money one place and this grant could complement,
Another.
you know, that's, I think.
Yeah.
And they might decide because Bennington doesn't have methadone, that they should.
well, they've already decided we should, we just can't get it. You know, they keep promising it.
So the Department of Health is all set for this? I think that's fine.
The house,
No, Department of Health.
Department of Health.
health, yeah,
Yeah, so I mean, they're.
Did they mention any of these other players in the prevention field?
no, she was.
Shayla? Oh,
Oh, well, she
it's-
doesn't, she doesn't know about the council.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with adding a consultation with, and I don't have a problem with,
I think it should be in collaboration with, if you consult, then it means like, we're gonna do this, what are you gonna do? I think collaboration means you work together to make sure that you don't have redundancy or that you're using the money most effectively. So that, I mean, that's kind of the way I see it. I'm not disagreeing with you, this is important.
but it's making sure that we're using all the dollars in the
Yeah.
system to get you where you wanna be.
Right.
Okay. I don't think the intent, I mean, is in any way, change, undermining what you wanna do is, what we wanna make sure is that we put stuff out ad hoc, so to speak, and then the question becomes one of how well it gets connected. Or I didn't know you were doing, for example, a lot of the violence, I'm sure, is drug related. But we've already got money going out to address violence that is associated with drugs. That's based on what you said. Seems like that money that we're talking about would be key, you know, as we're looking at grant applications and how it all should fit together rather than I got a grant, you got a grant, and I'm gonna.
But I think that also
Well, we
falls
have a
right in the
director of
same
violence.
line of what we did in the budget.
so you want a consultation and collaboration? You look at line 11 on page 9. Or actually, I may be
Page
looking at a
9?
different.
I was looking on page 14.
I'm on
Okay,
page 14.
I'm looking at an earlier draft.
Oh, okay. I think we're looking at page 14.
Yeah, I mean, the statewide strategies,
So,
fits
when we
perfectly.
look at line 11 on page 13.
13.
13.
There you have in consultation with the Department of Public Safety, Director of Violence Prevention, Executive Director Racial Excellence.
I guess we probably ought to also add Monica then.
I think you add Monica, and I think you might want to add, when you get to the, so as I look at this, what I see is a significant amount of funding going out, perhaps to public safety, boots on the ground, no question about that, so critically important. But then we also know that we have these crisis response teams that include, but that may be embedded in our designated agencies and that may work with public safety. So it's not one's place. I'm trying to figure out how to broaden the language so that it represents some of the community-based services that are currently out there. But, you know, there's a CIT program, there's the COOTS program that's starting up. So there are different programs out there. They aren't all linked in. They're linked in with public safety, they're linked in at municipal level, and each municipality
Well,
has
maybe
something different.
in the grants, should be, I don't know, the purpose, I mean, in other words, identify how that initiative would, I'm just thinking, in other words, where those local partnerships with existing resources would be, a part of their grant design or their program response design.
Yeah, and how it coordinates with the work that the Department of Health Prevention Council is doing. It's not a matter of changing what you have, but it might broaden the opportunities to do
I think
more.
we probably could come up with something that
Yeah.
makes it, but I mean, I get, the whole intent is we've got money going out to communities in a variety of ways in the form of programs or funding of agencies. And so the question is how to make sure this money in fact complements or we get the maximum return for the bucks that we've already got there to go with the ones you want.
No objection in adding Monica department.
That money's gotta be going to the big communities, so.
No, it's
No,
not, no,
So
no.
what
Go
the,
to
It
North
goes to-
Troy.
It goes to
You've had an
justice and,
increase in violence.
so who's gonna get it? Who's it?
well,
Communities
no
that apply
coordinator.
for it, number one. Number two, communities that can show they've had an increase in violence and an increase in human trafficking,
yeah,
drug activity.
so they work with law enforcement and,
So if you want to put in consultation, strike consultation or keep consultation and collaboration with,
I would.
and you want to add what's Monica's title?
She's a chief prevention officer.
well, so the guidelines would increase community capacity, build on existing, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
Eric needs direction.
In other
I'm not
words,
following
and the
that.
guidelines would really include how this proposal would fit and build or expand on.
Coordinate and
current,
collaborate.
Well, that's, I hate those
Collaborate.
terms.
I
I
like
hate
collaborate.
those terms.
You don't like collaboration?
No, no. I mean, in other words, I just want to make sure that if we're putting money out there through whatever means, that what we're doing here is it recognizes it and it doesn't work in parallel, I guess is what I'm trying to say too.
That's the
Shouldn't
word.
duplicate any existing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it should complement and build on or something,
Yeah.
complement.
Okay, so collaborate with, you add Monica Hudson, who mentioned.
I got that.
And the
And then
Department of Health.
add the, pardon?
Is the Department of Health Prevention Council, and she's the.
It's not the Department of Health, that would put her under.
Yeah, you've already
No,
got
she's
Commissioner
the
of
Chief
Health, is-
Prevention Council. She's the Chief Prevention Officer.
but she's not in the Department of Health.
No, but she works with prevention.
But the Department of Health is
Yeah, so they would.
grant
Yeah,
administrator.
Which is fine. It's just a matter of somebody who's got a sense of how, what we have out there for money, what the grants are, and making sure that any application is kind of gonna work in a complementary way and build on, you know, the community, what the community's already got for work. They may have some community groups already. For example, I know the health department's got prevention people out on drug prevention in little towns like Wells River. So I just think
The towns are being overwhelmed by
I know,
violence.
that's why we need to make sure that what's out there is recognized and built on, as
Right.
opposed to I'm gonna create my own.
Mine's coming from that.
And you
Well,
want
yours is
yours
coming
to
from
prevention oriented, not.
We need to build a wall. And it's gonna be paid for by Massachusetts.
Yeah, right. Well,
I got the answer, Andy.
So I think, oh, sorry, Brian. What I think you have so far. So add in consultation and collaboration. And then you add the chief prevention officer to the list of folks who are being collaborated with. And then at the end of sub B1, where it says grants in one of the sections shall be the purposes of funding, et cetera, at the end of that sentence, that build on and complement existing programs for funding these initiatives or something like that. Is that-
Yeah,
that
sounds
makes
like
sense.
you captured.
But you also have the. all
It
the
could
minutes,
happen, and it should probably happen anyway, but it oftentimes doesn't.
So what about the money though? So that's
We're
gonna be.
we're gonna have to make it,
So you're gonna have some
Our usual
sort
way.
of statement about the grants being dependent on appropriation, because the appropriations section will come out.
and we're
But
putting
this
it,
could be used like great fusion. The other thing is that there's the advisory council on the prescription drug settlement that has a lot of money, and they're making recommendations for how to use that right
oh, it
now.
would be nice if we could take
So it
it.
would be nice if everybody's working some kind of together.
The other thing is, with all the money that we have from congressional earmarks, is there something else there
Well,
that we need to make
that's
sure
part of
that?
the idea behind the language that allows you first use grants and
federal,
other bits
okay.
of federal money
Yeah, all right, that's great.
that if available, and then you use it.
Yes, then the state.
And state money is only the last, really intended to be the last resort. I don't know if we'll ever need 10 million state at one time.
Because there is a lot, I thought, for prevention or drug related issues.
There's settlements, there's drug related.
Yeah.
other things.
So,
But so what do? You're taking out section 10 completely?
yeah, the appropriation, and we'll put it,
What about
all the other stuff.
It's important to have.
Well, I know it is, and,
It's in sub A of section 10 that you took out.
Yeah,
just take
that first sentence.
and then,
And then
and the rest would stay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, the rest looks good.
so it's
And I
sub A
think
would
the
be.
Department of Health wanted language that would allow 1% to be used for administration.
That's in the A.
To the extent that you actually provide money in the big bill, I would put that administration piece, and it would, the percent would change based on the amount
Okay,
of
so
money that you.
you want to take section 10A out? not
Yes.
something-
Yeah,
Just
but the rest would stay.
And the changes that Eric just.
Yeah.
on the allowing the overhead piece.
So-
fine with that.
Said person.
Is section 9 the only part of the bill that deals with this community balance prevention program? There's somebody that runs grant programs. It's- I have some questions about the language and see it. Not it's a problem, but maybe I'll ask you.
Oh, okay, so the director of violence prevention is the person in the governor's office.
Yes.
Yeah, so then if we're adding Monica Hutt, who's also in the governor's office, that makes a lot of sense. She is the chief prevention officer. It seems there's a lot of, they don't let the department of redundancy happening.
Are you talking about clarifying, or you want to change some language in the C and D?
I guess I'm confused by it, so, but I don't know if I need to understand it, but, because it talks about grants, but then it talks about data that's being collected, but it's not clear to me that that's being collected by the grantees or where, what, how that, and so I guess you would assume that's what it is, but I don't think C is really clear about the data collection. If that's separate, and if so, who's doing that? Because the program's doing it, so it's the Department of Health. So I just thought if we want to make sure that the grantees are doing this, do we want to say that? And then on.
It's not, sorry, it's not supposed to be the grantees. The program, and that's why in the new language that the department that Senator Sears was referring to is broader and says that language is appropriation to the program for purposes of the, not necessarily exclusively the grants, but the other role that they have as well, which is the data collection piece.
And so could they use some of the 10 million for that, or is the 10 million just for the grant? And then the statewide strategies organized. So nowhere else does it talk about the statewide strategies. Are those the grants? What are the statewide strategies organized by the Department of Health?
I believe that's also asked for by the department.
That's in the amendment.
Not sure if that's.
Statewide evaluation was intended to be all the grants, whether you had one in Bennington, one in.
So those would be the regional strategies and the strategies that are being funded through this grant process.
That's what I was looking for, because the statewide strategies organized by the Department of Health include these contracts and evaluations and other strategies.
Well, unless we do statewide strategy, but they aren't going to vary depending on community by community. So it's not a statewide initiative here. It seems to be what we're really are we talking about the prevention strategies funded?
You have the prevention coalitions that.
We meant statewide, we meant, could these programs be implemented in other communities? Okay, that's what my understanding is, that statewide, correct me if I'm missing something, Eric.
I think if it's referring to, maybe it should be guidelines. It's the second sentence in subdivision 2. The commissioner is supposed to establish guidelines for the award of programs. Guidelines shall include increasing community capacity to implement approaches for human services, public health, public safety, et cetera, to address root causes of violence, substance abuse, to guide different projects. So to me, that's what they're referring to. Those are the strategies. Then they include assistant contracts, evaluation of the program, other strategies that would benefit grantees. So conceptually, it seems like there's a connection between those two things. So maybe strategies should be guidelines, because that's appears to be what they were referencing.
So, and then can I speak? Can I make a comment?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so
But it seems like I'm talking about guidelines for the grants. That's how I would interpret it, because it follows right after for the award of the grants. The guidelines shall include. So maybe we need a bit more center lines.
yeah, so I'm looking at this, implement approaches for human services, public health, public safety, collaboration, root causes. So the other person, I don't know if we should mention this other person or not, but we do have a trauma-informed director in the Agency of Human Services who looks at trauma and prevention specifically, and trauma frequently contributing to violent behavior. So I don't know, maybe that trauma somewhere, I was feeling like that should probably be mentioned. But
Well, I don't know.
There's a lot.
They're gonna
There's
kind
so
of,
much.
well, the problem is make it narrow, otherwise everything's
Yeah.
gonna connect everything else in state government here.
I'll look at the, maybe Eric, you can help me, or I can look with, I forgot whether it's Kate or Jen, for the prevention council that's in the Department of Health and see what that language is, because I think there might be some related language for data collection and information. That would help.
Well, the data collection
Clarify it.
is
You
in
may just
C.
want to strike D.
Yeah. What?
You may just want to strike D, then you might clarify it. Unless you want to ask them what they meant by that.
Who is that?
Department of Health.
Oh, they wanted that?
Yes.
Well, why, I guess, yeah, the program should use monitoring and evaluation data to track the impact of interventions. So it seems like that's really what evaluation would be doing. So maybe the answer is solve our problem, get rid of D, and let the health department, let it, yeah,
And
let them do
they're
what they
allowed-
should do anyway.
And they're allowed to use the
Because you're not
appropriation,
invested in D, right? Okay.
Is
They're
this a
allowed-
1 year?
but it
Yes,
carries,
that's it, it's a
I think-
one time.
well,
Well, it has
Nine program?
carry forward.
I know, yeah, it carries
Yeah,
forward.
we can
Yeah.
carry it forward.
If they don't spend the 10 million or whatever we
Yeah.
have.
No, I think it's a healthy thing to do.
But it's
Yeah.
1 year program.
Okay.
You want to strike D, it's
Why
easier,
don't, why don't we, rather than obsess over the language?
so they can deal with it now.
Because they still have their 1%, maybe that would cover that work that they want to do.
Okay, so we'll just deal with that one, we'll strike D, and then we'll just strike the a specific appropriation. keep the rest
Strike
of the
D
one-
and then section, in
A.
section 9, you strike D and section 10,
And
you
just the
strike
A.
A.
All right, thank
That's
you.
simple. Put in the coordination and
Yeah, I got the rest of that for sure. And I think adding something that, like Stephanie was saying, into section 9, like, or you could have grants awarded shall be dependent on the amount of appropriation, something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, and we've got the standards.
I've got to leave by 4 o'clock.
Yes, you
Back to the
absolutely
floor.
do.
Yeah, I know.
So,
So,
Are you,
um,
I'm just wondering about reporting this bill out, but as we can vote it out and it still can be done.
You can take it up tomorrow. We can vote it out now.
somebody
I
can
think
take it out
amendment.
tomorrow when it's
Because
done.
you should be the reporter.
I am the reporter for judiciary.
We did that.
He's the reporter for
Yeah,
this.
Yeah, it should.
Somebody can take it up and
We'll
then
just take it
you
up in
switch
my
the
name,
names.
yeah. I don't care if it doesn't go up till tomorrow, and make it up for second reading on Tuesday.
Yeah.
all right, I can send you the amendment tonight, and then,
Yeah,
And then
no,
you can approve it and,
Yeah, no, I just, but somebody needs to take it up and sign my name. Whatever they do.
or actually Bloomer can sign your name if you've given that, because you're gonna be remote.
Well, I'll
Right?
be remote Friday. I won't be
Tomorrow you
remote
just-
tomorrow, I can't make it. I'm gonna be under the knife.
Jeez.
Well,
Hopefully they use.
if it goes up tomorrow, then
It's not a dull, but
Yeah, not a double.
it goes up tomorrow.
Yeah, but he's not here to sign it. He's
Yeah,
out.
but Bloomer will sign it tomorrow. 'cause
Well, he
he's not-
needs to have that email authorization from Sears
Yep.
to sign. That's what I'm talking about.
can you do that tonight, Senator Sears? If I send it to you, can you then forward it, or I could CC John? Say, respond to this
Yeah, I'll
email.
just send John an email right now saying,
It's just, on Friday's just gonna be such a crunch.
on the floor. Yeah,
Well, here,
that's not here. Oh,
thank you, Eric.
Yeah, sure.
I think the main thing is you'll draft it up and Senator Sears,
I'm gonna
Yeah.
send an email to John.
and we can review it tomorrow.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good.
All right.
Should I send it to the committee as well, to Andrea and Stephanie, just so
Yes,
everybody's kind of
please do.
CC'd on
Yes,
it?
yeah, that would be good.
Okay.
Okay,
Perfect, will do.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so now we're on to S42. We have the treasurer here.
Should we vote on this for now?
We can,
We voted before I leave,
all right.
because it'd be look funny if the reporter.
All right. I will do it.
Well, the language better be good.
So we have the motion to amend the bill, which is being drafted now. And wants to make the motion to amend.
I'll make
Okay. Senator Sears. And Senator Starr is second. And then, did you get an answer from John?
Yeah, it's actually, it's like not section of the bill. It's not how much. When we get past my paycheck, I think it's solved.
It's solvable.
Yeah, we can just pull 100,000. Yeah. It's a different, the 2 million was already out of that bill. We didn't have the rate addition.
Oh, okay. Oh, thank God.
Okay, so, the vote on, this is the. vote
On the amendment.
For
Here.
Lyons,
Yes.
Birchler,
Yes.
Star, or Sears,
Yes.
Star,
Yes.
Weston, yes, Mitchell.
Yes. And now I need a motion to move the bill favorably as amended. Senator Sears
All
again.
set.
Okay, second by second.
Ruth is here, Senator Lyons,
Yes.
Birchler,
Yes.
Sears,
Yes.
Star,
Yes.
Weston, yes, Mitchell,
Yes.
and Sears is.
Sears. 601. Okay. Thank you. I know you have to leave at 4, so we're gonna move on to S42. Treasurer wants to come up.
De minimis is in the bill. The word de minimis is in the bill.
In which bill? 42?
First, second page. That's a word of the week.
So what we have, S42 is a bill on investment in state pension funds. And if you want to just present, I know this came out of government operations, it's been a topic of discussion. We had some other kind of discussions and changes, and I guess the question becomes one of what gets excluded and what's included. And
Yeah, for
I need
sure.
to have your assessment. in
Yeah,
terms of
sure.
What this does.
Well, I'll give a very brief overview of sort of, the historical context in the last committee that got us to here, and then I'll talk about, our feelings as it relates to the current version of the bill that's in front of you here. So S42, originally presented, the Treasurer's Office had an amendment to it that we suggested that would more align the intent of the bill with a divestment proposal that Middlebury College implemented a number of years ago. So it would include a definition of de minimis. It would say that it was 2%. At the time, there was some question about whether the 2% applied to the direct holdings of fossil fuel or the entire portfolio. Could read it one or either way. And then the other thing that our amendment did was exclude both index funds and private investments, so private equity and private credit, from the plan of divestment. So we were close to having agreement on that, but some wanted the de minimis to be more clearly defined as applying to the entire investment portfolio. And some wanted and index funds in particular to be included in the plan. So we had a conversation during town meeting week, quite extensive, with all of the stakeholders, environmental advocates for the bill, VPIC leadership, ourselves at the Treasurer's Office. We got to a place where I got to a place personally, I think we as the Treasurer's Office got to a place where we were comfortable with the amendments that were made for Act 42, which are in front of you. What they sought to do was clearly expand the 2% de minimis as applying to the entire portfolio. So 2% of fossil fuels can be maintained in the portfolio, whether it's in private credit, index funds, or in direct holdings. So it's not just direct holdings. So in that way, it kind of limits how many fossil fuel investments you can have because it applies across the board. It also made explicit that index funds were part of a plan of divestment. So those were the changes. But the reason that we felt comfortable supporting the bill is, we come from a position of wanting to make sure the pension is not harmed, that there's not increased cost and there's not a likelihood of reduced investment returns by implementing this proposal. And we did not feel that either of those two things would happen. And there's reasons for those, and I'll just line them out. Ultimately, the fiduciary duty of VPIC is expressly stated in here that they retain their ability to make decisions deviating from the plan if it's consistent with their fiduciary duty. So the plan as drafted says by 2030, there'll be divestment from direct holdings and index funds. By 2040, it would be private credit. But something that overrides both of those prongs is their ability to make decisions that are based on their own fiduciary duty and sound investment practices. So that's still clearly maintained in the bill. There's also the de minimis exemption. So even though there are those dates in there, both in terms of prior to 2030, prior to 2040, and following those dates, a de minimis amount can still be held if it's consistent with fiduciary duty practices. So I thought that was really important as well, because it can be really expensive to completely unwind an index fund that is a broad-based index fund that might include a very small percentage of fossil fuel investments. And it would also be potentially complicated, or at least you would lose the opportunity for a lot of investment returns if you weren't able to invest in private credit that had a very small percentage of fossil fuel holdings. So the de minimis component was very important. There's also a carve out for private investments generally as well, which was again important that those would not be necessarily subject to the plan, and they would again retain the fiduciary duty to make those decisions. And then the authority that was contained in the bill, it gave a lot of the authority to VPIC to come up with definitions of fossil fuel and carbon footprint. It gave the authority to come up with a plan. So I thought it presented a good partnership. It wasn't a directive from the legislature to VPIC, but was setting goals and telling VPIC to implement them and telling them to come up with a lot of the important language that would be operative in the divestment plan as well. So for all of those reasons, I got to a position where I was comfortable with this proposal and still am now as well, with the primary objective of making sure we do no harm to the pension system, either in terms of lost investment returns or increased expenses specific to this plan. And I don't think that's what it does. I think it presents a flexible framework to work from. And it also should, of note, recognize the work that VPIC has done to date, both on their ESG initiatives, their decarbonization policy, their engagement practices as well, of engaging with companies to get them to change particular behavior. And with the de minimis exemption, I think all of those things are retained, their ability to act in those ways. So
I think it might be inherent in fiduciary duties, but one of the things that I'm the one person still surviving from the underfunding of the pension and putting together a plan to get us to where we should be funded by 2038. I'm not going to be here in 2038, I can assure you. But from the past experience around making sure that right now, in order to really fund that underfunding scenario, which is important to teachers and any retired state employees, is the ADEC. And we have gigged up the ADEC. And so it's now like 26% of payroll. And so all our budgets are reflecting a very significant increase. And that is not only for state employees, but it's also municipal employees that sheriffs, for example, that are participating in the retirement fund. One sheriff said that the ADEC impact on their office was over $80,000. So
yes, right.
And you remember that conversation. So the importance of what impact, and to me, the ADEC is so important to ensure the ability to pay out that pension commitment that we have to retirees. So I was thinking that maybe we should make some reference to the ADEC, because that really is where you would reflect sort of all the parameters that you're talking about. Now, I realize the ADEC gets influenced by a whole host of assumptions, living longer, et cetera. But we are going to be probably confronting with our next experience rating, everybody's suggesting that some of those inflation assumptions around the COLA are going to have to be modified, and we're going to be dealing with, even higher ADEC costs. So I would feel comfortable making it clear in that fiduciary duties or something, if we can make some connection to the ADEC.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, Senator Kitchell, because, as I mentioned, our perspective was do no harm to the system from increased expenses or from a loss of investment return. And either of those things, increased expenses or loss of investment return, would impact the ADEC. So I think whether in the general fiduciary duty or whether, back to that, for these specific carve-outs, there's fiduciary duty overlays into them specifically, or they have ability to make sound investment practices. Formalizing that and saying that will not have an impact, a direct impact on the ADEC, because other things will impact it, I think would be consistent with the.
With what you're saying was
Yeah.
the intent around the parameters. And then I know that certainly there was reference to recognize the importance of the role of this commission, which we established and removed legislators from for obvious reasons, and recognize the work that they've done. So I think, in light of, and we've had some conversations about, and I've talked to the chair. So I just want you to know, I've talked to the chair of government ops. This is not a surprise in terms of maybe making some reference to the important role VPIC's going to play in this.
And their work to date, for sure,
And
too.
their work to date, and just, making it clear in that fiduciary that, the ultimate manifestation is going to be on impact that we, would be based on the parameters. There shouldn't be that impact on the APEC as a result of this legislation. So I would like to make that more explicit. As somebody who's been the warrior on the underfunding of pensions.
I think it makes sense to me, Senator.
So I think I'll need some help in proposing just those, not to move the bill forward, but with just an amendment that makes it,
Tighten this up.
well, it just makes it more explicit, particularly as it because, I know that at the committee that there was, some concern or even some negative votes ultimately taken by the three unions. And I just, I can't imagine now with the protections here, that maybe that might make a difference. Senator Ferguson.
When I read it, tell me if I'm wrong, if this is developing a plan, it's really not doing anything.
Developing a plan, although the plan, the spirit of the bill is that the plan would be operational, right? So that.
I read the intent language, but it very well could be that no divestment happens, the way this language is written.
Then if no divestment happens, it would be because there's been an active decision that it would be against the fiduciary duty, or, or it fits within the de minimis amount. So it'd have to hit one of those, I would view it as hitting one of those carve outs.
Where does it require the divestment? Because I see them developing a plan and reporting on the plan, but their reports could say we didn't make any progress.
Yeah, there was a section that had intent.
Drive
I thought this was in there. Yeah.
Hey, Chair.
Yeah,
At least you've
that's-
got decent.
Does legislative intent carry the force of law?
Sorry, Becky Wasserman, Legislative Counsel. There's also a requirement that in the plan of coming back, there is legislative, they either come back with recommendations for legislative action.
Right.
Oh, the other thing I want to add is, I want to make it clear on both areas. We created a pension oversight to really look at the pension system in totality. And so I think any impact, and I know that we're referenced in one place, I think we wanted to make sure that because we're looking at the entire pension system in terms of not only the pensions, but also, the progress we're making toward that 2038 goal. So I think that there's reference
That
to.
committee, it receives all the reports that come in, so they are referenced. Yeah, they're listed in every section.
Are they?
Yeah.
Somebody said there was one.
No, they're there.
They're listed for every section.
Okay, well, that's good. Because I don't want to create an oversight committee and then not recognize its role. So Senator West.
Well, it's a follow-up, but you mentioned 2% in it. So, and where are we now
Right.
in because I think that's a follow-up to what Senator Perchlik asked about. Where are we now in relationship to the 2%?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one I was interested in myself, and I don't think we don't have an affirmative answer for it yet, and it's part of the reason why VPIP wants to do the report. And I didn't mention the report, but the report is really important in my view, because it provides, it measures it, it provides accountability, and that's really will give you a sense of where are we and where are we going.
Okay, so, if you finish, then
Yes.
I'll go to, okay, so we have, Senator Clarkson here, who's.
Thanks, I have the pleasure of reporting the bill. Richie, we are gonna have a review and an inventory of the portfolio, of the pension portfolio, so we'll have an answer to your question by next February, which is the first step. And then the plan will get developed from there, once we know what the scale of the challenge.
Okay, so we don't understand right now how much we have of the portfolio that is currently, but we set the 2% in there, and
As a
we-
goal.
as a goal.
No, 2% is not a goal.
No, I thought the goal, I thought it
Oh,
was.
no, it's the intent.
It's the
And
intent.
the long-term goal is to divest and.
The long,
implement-
and that divestment will happen by 2030.
2034, 2040, depending on which assets. But one of the exemptions to that is the de minimis.
Still gotta meet
But,
the.
but what everybody will say at that point is,
It's the law.
this is the law, and you'll have to have kind of extraordinary reasons to go out around that.
Well, that's, but we're back to that fiduciary,
Yeah.
condition, which.
I'm just trying to, but I think it's a clear follow-up to
Oh,
where
sure.
Senator Perchlik was.
Andy, do you have your question answered? Or, I guess the answer is we don't know at this point, and that's what that examination would.
It is just a plan, not to say that it's not a great bill. I like it, I vote for it, but I just wanted to be clear that it wasn't missing something.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's right, Senator, yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Rich, you have another?
No, I see it as more than a plan. If we're laying
That's why-
out
Plan
and
that's
saying it
highlighted
needs to
and
be
circled
2%,
with
but I
it.
don't know if it's a plan, well, how much of a uphill battle it is, if I don't know how much it is.
Well, it's.
That's why it's a good
Annually,
bill.
they're gonna submit, it's on the progress.
Yep.
So it's gonna be an iterative, I think, process.
And you know, and just from a financial risk standpoint, I mean, having that inventory is really valuable to know, you know, how much of your portfolio is exposed to fossil fuels. So you can look at this from a risk
Because
analysis.
there's a risk
Yeah.
attached as we're seeing
Yeah.
whole.
Yeah, and I think that's real progress just to get that report, because 3 years ago, Tim Ash and I met with the prior treasurer and BPEC, and they said, it can't be done, can't do it. And so, you know, we were gonna have a bill on that, but they were so adamant that it couldn't even be done, that we dropped it. So I'm glad that now at least we do hear it.
You have to land on a definition, and then
Yeah.
once you land on the definition, then you just keep it consistent year over year.
So Senator Lyon, do you have?
I was gonna ask about that. The definition is important, but then the other piece of it is if you're divesting and a company or corporation is moving toward a different place, but maintaining some fossil fuel at the
Right.
same time they're moving to renewables, there might be a consideration for the new enterprise to.
And I think, Senator, I think that was the heart of the de minimis exemption to begin with.
Yeah,
Was that, so say a company is, you know, has some historical fossil fuel operations, but they're largely, and they've spent their reserves to move toward renewable energy. So is that, you know, maybe they're defined as a fossil fuel company, but because of where they're transitioning to, it's not worth divesting if it's otherwise a sound investment.
Yes.
One other question, either for Clarkson or the treasurer, did you look at that New York? Because that's when the divestment plan in New York that I understand, they kind of did that. They said, we want to divest, but if you just, at least you have a plan, we can keep the investment in that.
Yeah. And so we did look at both of them. I had a chance.
Maine too.
And Maine. I had a chance to speak with the comptroller in New York City, and that was enlightening because he just sort of explained, because they've divested, but he was able to shed light on, just the size and the scope of their pension plan and what they were able to accomplish. And the resources that they have to accomplish it too. And the same with New York State. They just have many more human resources to be able to accomplish something like that. So, and I think VPIC would need a lot more people to do the same.
Other questions? Otherwise, you have some proposed language.
Yes,
What I talked about.
I think my question is the ADAC language more intent, or is it something that should be considered in the plan? Or is it, does it only apply to the exemptions that? So will the divestment happen by 2030 for all of their holdings regardless of the ADAC situation?
No,
or
I
does-
think that's part of the fiduciary.
Okay. Okay.
Fiduciary
Okay,
So,
the fiduciary
to me, it's
responsibility.
more explicit,
Okay.
but, so I would view it as a part of that fiduciary piece.
In addition to it.
Okay.
I would suggest in addition to it, just because then you're not legislating what fiduciary is.
I agree.
Thank you. I know that you came to us on children. Are you all set then, Becky?
Yeah, I think I'm all set, yeah.
So I was gonna add some language about the important role VPIC is gonna play in all of
Yeah,
this.
that's important.
And then add the ADECs, and hopefully then we can move this bill out.
Well, thank you very much.
I know you
Thank you.
have to go, right?
Yeah, we have to go across the room, across the hallway.
I realize ranked choice voting is next, but I've got to take a break. We have been here since, well, I've been here since I was in finance at 12.